Welcome to a new edition of Botcasters. Today with Marc van Deuren and Theo van der Donk, Dutch names, but from the company Vormer. Introduce yourselves and of course introduce Vormer.
All right, I'll start off with introducing myself. I'm Marc van Deuren. I'm working at Vormer here in Zwolle. Been working here for 5 years. I'm a software engineer, and I've been building applications basically, and more recently, more and more with some AI integrations, which I think is what we're going to talk about today a little bit. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Theo?
Okay, I'm Theo van der Donk, software engineer with about 20 years of experience, both in the traditional software engineering world and in the artificial intelligence. Like Mark, I work for Vormer, a company from Zwolle in the Netherlands, where we have about 20 people, and our goal is to make software for companies to really help them in their processes and to improve them. We also do outsourcing of people, but our dream is to make cool products for ourselves and for other companies, and we're doing that already quite a lot. We're part of a larger group, CC Group. There are about 20 companies part of CC groups, which makes it possible for us to also participate in very large projects like for governments, etc.
Complicated tenders.
Complicated tenders, yes.
Especially in the European Union. Very complicated, I know. And what makes Vormer a special company? Because I talked to you guys and there's this, I sense this vibe in your company, and if you talk to you and your CEO, that something happens. So maybe you guys can explain what makes Vormer a special company. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure. Shall I take this one, Theo?
Yeah.
I guess I would say Vormer is a quite small company, but as Theo said, within a larger holding. So we're small and dynamic, mostly young as well, I guess. But we still can use the expertise of the larger holding, which makes us quite dynamic. And more recently, like I said, we're focusing a bit more on AI things because obviously it's more present, and because we're such a dynamic team, we can afford to look into that more and more as well. So we can change it up a little. That's basically what we do. We make custom software specifically tailored for the customer's requirements. So not just some default packages, but we actually go to the clients and we discuss the requirements. We make something specific for them. So I guess that's what makes us unique a little bit.
Interesting. You should say that. How often do customers change their minds about specifications? Because there's one thing I've experienced, that you come in and people order A, and then you come with A, and it's like, yeah, but I want a slice of B in it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that happens a lot. That happens a lot, and I think the trick is to detect that as early as possible. Obviously, minds are going to change, and requirements will change, and our processes in developing the software are attuned to the fact that they might change as well. But it's also a matter of speaking to the customer early and not just listening to what they say, but listening to what they mean, or at least try to continue on, try to see if you understand them correctly. Maybe they want something different than what they say. Sometimes you can detect that early. And you just have to keep in mind that it will change during the process.
And keep asking questions after question. And the 5 times why.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like handling a small kid. Same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not saying customers are small kids. No, I'm not saying. But basically, it's the Socrates method. It's the way you analyze a problem and you get to the bottom of it. And usually the core problem is something else than people think of.
Yeah. It's also That's
Sorry.
also how we like to work most. We like those little projects or projects that start very small. The customer has an idea what he wants to achieve, but he doesn't know it all. And we help him through the process. We start very small with the pilot, and then we build on and on. And while we continue, everybody learns from the project, and the customer knows better and better what he wants in which direction. We always help him choosing what will give the most business value at the given moment. That's what really gives us energy to start small and to build it out until exactly what the customer wants.
You use the words. This is what triggers me: business value, and this is very interesting because we're talking about today about AI and chatbots. Um, Now, what I see is a lot of companies have difficulties figuring out where they understand there is some business value at some point somewhere in their company, but a lot of high level executives think if we take AI and every problem is solved, and then we start saving money. Um, but the fact is a little bit different. The reality is a little bit different. Um, so if you talk about business value, how do you go from, okay, you need to invest a shitload of money and time and resources, that means people and knowledge, in order to get somewhere, and that is not today, not tomorrow, but that is half a year or 2 years from now, to create that actual business value. And by the way, we might fail. And that's also a success because then we know it doesn't work. Um, how do you guys are apparently good at that. So how do you do that? Because I know a lot of companies working with AI are really struggling with this on both ends. So the buying companies and the companies that are actually building.
Yeah.
I think I could say something to that, at least to the fact that some companies start off saying, or some clients start off saying, we want something with AI. And what they sometimes, I feel like, forget is that AI is not the entire solution, or not the entire product even. I think it's essential to understand that AI is part of the product, in the sense that, for instance, you can use AI chatbot to interface with an application, and what the user sees is the chatbot and will chat with the chatbot and thinks that the AI does everything. But the trick is that the AI is only the front, is only the way you communicate with the system that's behind it. And the system that's behind it is what's giving the business value, or at least is automating the processes, or is managing the data, or stuff like that. And the AI is only a way to interface with it. So when a company, yeah, it's helping you. It's helping the user. You could have a website with buttons, or you could have a chatbot with a chat where you speak to it. Both have the same responsibility. In this case, there's different cases obviously, but in this case, in the example that I'm mentioning now, have the same responsibilities in the fact that they're just there for the interaction between the user and the application, and the core of the application of the product that's actually providing the business value. So when a company says we want AI for this, we have to look through what they actually mean, because AI, yes, might make it more, might make the barrier lower for a user to use the system, but the system itself still needs to be built and still needs to perform the actual tasks that provide the business value.
This is very interesting because there's something else behind this, and I think Theo, you're the guy to talk to about the past. You're a little bit older than Mark, because you have 20 years and he has 5 years on the clock. So there is some age difference. You guys were smiling when Mark said we're young, and you're like, yeah, right. Maybe I'm not so young. But what a lot of companies and people don't understand, that they actually probably had already AI running around in applications they were using or are using, not even aware of the fact that they were using AI in it, or their suppliers are using, software suppliers are using it. Now, Theo, you have some early experience with AI. And it is interesting because you told me, I had no clue this existed then. I mean, I know it exists now, but so maybe you can enlighten us something you worked on quite a while ago, and that people understand AI and machine learning has been around for a while. Only now, because of the machines we have and the processors, we can do more interesting stuff and use it more widespread because of cloud computing and everything. But Theo, please enlighten us.
I will try to enlighten you. Yes, as I told you, I have about 20 years experience in the field, and it started with a great company also from the Netherlands that made software for postal organizations around the world. And they made software to automate the sorting process, basically the reading of mail, the reading of addresses, of handwritten addresses, machine printed addresses, stamp reading. They also did a lot of things for the traffic market, like reading a license plate, etc. And that's about 20 years ago, when we didn't have ChatGPT, when we didn't have the huge neural networks that we have today. In fact, the company made their own neural network because the existing neural networks at the time were not large enough to do what we needed. And in those days, AI was different than today. In those days, you spent quite some time um, in this case just reading something. It took a lot of effort to just read something on the text, but then afterwards you read something and you have to correct all the errors. AI is not perfect, not at this moment, not 20 years ago. So most of the time you spend in a project is about correcting all the mistakes that OCR makes. Um, well, when we jump 20 years ahead in time, we have all those wonderful neural networks. They're really good in OCR. OCR, it's a solved problem, as they say. It's not difficult anymore. But still, the challenge is in those last 10-20% of errors, of hallucinations, to get them right. And that's the part that didn't change.
But if there was a business case 20 years ago, and at a considerable cost, I would imagine, then imagine the business case now, the potential business cases. So if we're talking about business value, um, um, I think one of the problems, at least in the Netherlands, but probably wider spread in Europe, is the available knowledge. There's the available people that actually know what to do, how to do it in a proper manner. I mean, there's a lot of people that do something, but doing it corporate grade, where it's according to the EU AI Act and every other type of legislation, it's a different ballgame, in my opinion. And there's not that many people / companies that actually are able to do that. Let me add something to this. To do that without having an interest to sell something else, because if you look at I said cloud computing, AWS, Google, Microsoft with Azure, they love you to have AI because that's how they sell cloud computing and a lot of it. And the more you take into your company, then they have this nice button called price. You fire the people and then they up the price. Now, who makes the money of your savings? And people get fired. It's not a good idea because you shed the knowledge. And if there's one thing you need when you develop an AI in your company, it's knowledge and experience with processes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, having said that, if you look at what companies in Holland are doing, and I don't need any names of customers or potential customers, but what do you guys see happening in terms of the questions you're getting of, okay, we want AI, we discussed that. And then how do you make it small enough for them to be able to grasp it budget-wise and concept-wise, and yet still get them sold on doing something, because that's also your business model, of course, which is not a bad thing, by the way. Before you think I'm against business models, I'm pro. But it needs to be clear where companies make the model. There need to be no ulterior motives. And in cloud computing and AI, but big ones, there is ulterior motives. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree, by the way. So what do you see happening? How do you get to helping the company making something small to start with? Because it's so hard.
Yeah, well, maybe the best example is a nice conversation we had with a company who would like to have AI to to detect traffic signs and to determine whether they're still in the right place or whether they're damaged or whether they need replacement or whatever. Well, our first advice to them was, oh, let's not do AI. Let's start very small in the project. Let's start with an application where you can hire students or other people that can do the tutoring for you. And let's make an application and see if your customers like the application, if the customers really want the functionality. Let's start small. And then we can go one step beyond. The next step will be, let's use ChatGPT. OpenAI is currently also capable of doing image analysis. Let's use OpenAI to perform the basic recognition tasks. When it works, let's see if we can improve it with our own model, because OpenAI is also quite expensive. So then let's go on and move to a dedicated model if you have the need for it. But let's start small and do it step by step. And that's our approach.
Can I ask a crazy question about this? Because as you said, okay, traffic signs. There's one. My girlfriend, she recently acquired a new electrical car, and we were sitting, and this car detected every sign. So why don't you crowdsource that through all the cars driving are already taking an image and calculating what it is? Basically, they process the image and say, oh, this is don't go right here, or forbidden to go into, and it has a GPS location. So why wouldn't you that's how my brain works. Why don't you crowdsource it from all the new cars that come out, and that data needs to be shared voluntarily. You could even give a bonus for it and pay. So by driving around, you can actually make money.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you use that? Because statistically, all these cars come everywhere.
I think it's a good question, because we sort of already do in the software development community, called open source, is where we share our solutions basically. And what's fun about the recent few years and about the hype that's been generated around AI is that more and more people are delving into it and are coming up with new solutions and are sharing these solutions online as open source projects. The applications around the models, but the models themselves too. So there's definitely already models available online of open source contributors that made some models for detecting traffic signs and stuff like that. So we basically already do. We look at those models and see if we can implement them. It is always a question, especially with pre-trained AI models. What data has it been trained on? Has it been trained legitimately? Can we use it immediately in our project, or do we need to continue the training or make it more specific to our purpose? So there is sort of downsides in the sense that a model is still always a black box and you have to continue with that model. So how much can you count on the model being a good starting point? But because of the hype, like I said, in the recent few years, there's many options available online already. We don't make everything from scratch.
No, but it's about sharing data, and while we're at it, you could also detect holes in the road, because that's also registered by the car. So basically, and isn't it that all that data? I know Tesla does it. All that data gets collected somewhere, right? So we're talking about distributed computing. Basically, you use the computer power of the car, and then just get data back into your database, and then feed that into the government system. It's like, okay, you need to. It's actually, and it's interesting because you could even, I don't know, the crazy idea, get a discount on your road tax or something if you share the data for improvement purposes. It actually could be an interesting sharing model where sharing is caring.
That could be good. Yeah.
And it pays, I don't know, it's just a crazy idea. But the thing is, that the point I'm trying to make is that all this data, all the stuff that we do, the more sensors and shit we have everywhere, the more possibilities we have to relatively easily make this kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, but companies need to be willing to share their data, because obviously they have a software development team working on this as well, and they might not want to share it. Some companies do, some don't, but that's yeah, it's a commercial decision for a company to do
This
that.
is really interesting. Now, if you buy a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
I never read the user license of a car, electrical car. But if there's some data sharing, there must be some sort of agreement you have with the car company, right? So who owns the data if you're driving? Who owns the data of the route and everything it registers? I have
Yeah,
no idea, by the way. But that is a really an interesting. Sorry, I get carried away. But that's an interesting question.
no, I think so too. I think so too. I think I'm not sure, but I think sadly it depends on the car manufacturer and how their systems work. They have their own cloud and their own backend system. So some car manufacturers might choose to make it open, but some might not. But yeah,
I have a US lawyer specialized in that kind of stuff who he was also on my podcast. I'm going to ask him this question, maybe
yeah,
record it and then see. Okay, because I wouldn't be surprised if, according to EU law, that data belongs to the driver, to the owner of the car, or to the driver of the car. And if there's no user license, then we have no agreement that I was sharing my data.
yeah, yeah. Now, it could be that you then at least have access to your own data, but then if you want to have access to everyone's data, then maybe you'd have to go through a few hoops.
But anyway, interesting
Speculation.
thought. But what I'm the point I'm trying to make, we're generating massive amounts of data, and that allows us to do interesting stuff. There's business value and there's social value, and I think that this one has possibly both. Um, but I saw one project of you guys that had social value, and I was really I'm like, wow. Um, you probably know which one I'm pointing at.
Well, we have many projects that have social value. So
Q Assist.
QSS, yes, yeah. Yeah, it's a project where we build an app, an integration app that people can use to plan their traffic journey. And they can
But
combine a lot of,
you forget one thing. It's not just people. It's people that have a limitation in terms of
yes,
mobility. They're in a wheelchair or with crutches,
yeah,
or I don't know, one leg or something. So they're limited in the way they move. It's not the standard way of moving, and I think that's important. That's why I said social, because
yeah.
um, it is a problem everywhere.
You're right. I was not yet there at that point.
So
But
important that you
that's
forget
true.
it.
We combine all kind of non-standard traffic means like taxis and very local buses. We combine all that information to give those people indeed a good traffic experience. And also, those people often have like, yeah, I'm not so sure in English. In Dutch, it's indications. They have like a budget that they can spend for the traffic. That makes it even more complicated. So all of those knowledge and integration is all in the system.
So the way I look at your company, and now I'm not sure if you realize that, you guys are able to turn data into something useful, because that's what I see.
Yeah,
If I zoom out, and that's why I pointed at the question before about, okay, we're generating so much data, and you guys are able to do something with it, and with AI it becomes even more exciting because you probably can find patterns and stuff you otherwise would never find or do. Having said that, um, and it's maybe a bit of a weird bridge, but of course we have the traditional chatbots and we have AI chatbots, right? The traditional chatbot is a structured bot and it takes you from A to B very efficiently. And very often you don't need AI. You just want the great customer service and the process to be done. Um, but doing that, there's a lot of data behind it. Do you guys envision a world where we have no structured chatbots anymore, and every chatbot is AI driven, and all the processes behind it are done with AI, or there remains a lot of space for structured chatbots which have some sort of AI function in it, where where it goes off, where you need to go off topic or find something not logical, it listens in. It's like, what? Wait, I have something smart here, or you could use it for cross or upsell purposes. I don't know. How do you guys envision that future? Because there's a lot of discussion in the realm of chatbots, the traditional or not, especially on customer sides. They're very annoyed with AI chatbots that don't understand them, or even traditional chatbots or NLP driven chatbots. So how do you guys see that? And I didn't prepare you for this question, I know.
No, that's okay. It's something I alluded to a little bit earlier as well. That I think the value is in the combination of the two, in the combination of a structured backend of the application that handles the logic in a structured way, which makes it testable, for instance, which makes it very predictable, which is what you want when you're executing business critical processes, or at least processes where you handle customer data or stuff like that.
No surprises.
Yeah, I think it's very important that, or at least it helps to keep that part of the application structured and to keep it testable. However, what the user sees might be the chatbot, and that has a bit more room for fluency, because language in itself can change a lot. You can say the same thing in many different ways, and you want the chatbot to be able to understand all of those ways for the same purpose, so that the right functionality gets executed basically on the back end. So I think we should keep combining the two. I do see a future where chatbots, or at least automated chatbots, are automated using AI only, because I do think that gives you more freedom in how you want to talk to the chatbot. But I don't think the automated systems behind it should be managed by AI, at least not yet. I haven't seen the biggest innovations on that front where I would trust an AI to do that, because it remains a black box. It remains a bit vague what it exactly interprets and what it will execute.
And because there's so many platforms, if you look at the past 3-4 years, so many platforms came out to make a structured chatbot. And what you see now, they are integrating AI into it, but and if you see the customer reviews of those chatbots, it's not very helpful, to be honest. And many times I test the chatbot in the podcast, and sometimes I just have to stop because I get frustrated, and I know how it works. So and it saddens me because customers could have a great experience in a chatbot. And say, okay, I don't even have to talk to a person unless it's really, really complicated. But usually when you get stuck in the chatbot and then you get frustrated and then you start calling and then you're annoyed already when you're on the phone, which is, I think, not necessary.
Yeah.
So, and my worry is that those platforms are not going to survive, or many of them are not going to survive because companies are running off to AI-driven platforms because that's the holy grail, and then find out that that's not the holy grail either. There's more work to it. You need a whole team around it. It's not just the software is a tool. It's not it's an end to a means. It's a means to an end. Sorry, I said it the wrong way. Yeah. But they use it the other way around, and that's why my worry is that we're going to depart from one type of software, run to the other one, and it doesn't solve anything.
Yeah, that's exactly it's exactly my point from the beginning, that the first 80% of building an AI system is easy. It's very trivial nowadays, but getting the last 20% correct, so the difficult questions, that's very tricky. And maybe I can give you an example of one of our projects. It was a chatbot for a theater where people could ask travel advice when they wanted to go to a theater. And the goal was that people will not go park their car in the center of the city, but that they park at on the boundary of the village and then use public transport to get there. So the route planning inside the chatbot, it was not standard. It was custom-made route planning. And then if you have a chatbot that's not structured, then it's only very smart. So if somebody asks, how can I get to my show? It will just answer, oh, you just go by car and it's 20 minutes. Because the chatbot knows it, because it's trained on their data. And that's a big challenge to stop that. Yeah. to make it really make use of the structured data that we do provide it, but it's always trying to work around it and to find their own truth, and that's the game we're playing with AI.
I think going off of that as well, sorry, when you make a structured chatbot, you start off with no functionality and you add, okay, when the user asks for this, then this happens. When the user asks for this, then this happens. And you keep adding new things that it can do, that it can detect in a conversation. And when you start with an AI chatbot, it thinks it can do everything already, and you have to tone it down. You have to keep it in check. You have to say, okay, no, when you try to make up some weird route travel advice yourself, don't do that. Use our system. Make sure that you do it the way that we specified it. So it starts off very promising because with one line of code, you already have a whole chatbot. But then starts the problem of, okay, but we need to tone it down. We need to keep it in check. So it's you work from the other side, basically.
This is really the first time someone explained it to me. I understand it. Explained it to me this way. And I think for a lot of people who are not involved in this kind of tech, it actually makes a lot of sense that, okay, this one knows a lot, but I need to, make sure it does it the way I want it to be done.
Exactly.
And the other one is, okay, I need to teach it everything. And every new step, I need to teach it that or program it. But there's one other thing. If you look at of course, using AI, use large language models. And these models get updated the whole time. And one of the problems I have experienced, as we would say, and I wonder if you guys run into that as well and how you manage that, is that you have it set up perfectly. It works like a charm. You're like, oh, damn, we're good. And then all of a sudden, the model gets updated. And you use the API and you're like, oh my God, it's giving me a totally different answer on the same input. How the hell is this possible? And then you look at, oh, okay, the model's updated, but it makes no sense that the update leads to that different answer. And it's really annoying. And how do you guys manage that? Because it's frustrating because everything is the same. You didn't do anything.
Yeah, cool that you say. I experienced this last week with a very stable chatbot, the one I was just talking about.
Yeah.
And suddenly it had explicit instructions. Do never ask whether the user wants to come by car because we want him to use the public transport. And suddenly he started asking, do you want to go by car? And well, it took a few days of research until I found out that indeed the OpenAI model was updated to a new version, which totally changed the way it works. And that's frustrating to explain to a customer because the customer expects to buy a product that will work forever, like with normal software. But as soon as it's dependent on the AI model, then your business logic can change without touching any code. And the thing is that these models are only valid for half a year or 1 year, and then they are phased out for a newer version. So you have to be in the rat race of continuously adjusting to it. Otherwise, your software will just degrade. And well, the trick is to, I think, to reduce the intelligence of the amount of intelligence of your project that you put in the chatbot. At this moment, we tell everything to the chatbot by means of prompting. It's technical, but basically tell the chatbot if someone wants route advice, do this. If someone wants something else, do it that way. You tell everything up front, and it's up to the chatbot to do everything. But that's a lot of information he has to process, so you're very dependent on the model. You can also turn it around. You can give it some smaller instructions and do more of the control logic yourself in your application. And then your application will be more robust against model changes because the prompts that you send to the chatbot are much smaller and much clearer and much easier to understand, both for developers as for the chatbot itself.
So basically, we're getting technical now, but what you're saying, basically, we take everything apart. It's like if old school programming where you say, okay, I have different layers in the software, if the front end, the middleware, and the back end, and even the data separately, so you can exchange every component. And basically, that's what you're saying. We take the different components and stack them on top of each other,
Yeah.
and put it somewhere where we de-risking it. I would say.
If you, I think in addition to that, a large language model is named as such because it's good at language, at processing languages. If you use it for that purpose, it's brilliant. But if you expect it to make very informed decisions about travel advice, it might not be that good because it's not a travel advice model, it's a large language model. So what Theo just said as well, I think if you don't let the entire conversation be managed by the large language model, but use the large language model where it's most potent, and that is processing the language and extracting from the questions from the customer or from the user what its intent is, and then firing off some other functionality. If you use it for that, then you're using it correctly, basically. It will try to give you travel advice by itself, but it's never really been trained on giving good travel advice. So don't try it. Don't make it.
Well, it's interesting because I like to travel, and I use just for the hell of it, I use LLMs to see how far I get by using them.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Now that I'm not going to take the trip, but it found a boat connection between somewhere. I'm like, hell, I didn't even know. I Googled it, I couldn't find it, and it found it. And I asked for the link, I got it, and it actually worked. It's there. It's real.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a local boating company, and it was in Spanish. So if you ask it in Dutch, then Google's like, it didn't work.
No.
So the interesting thing is there is up to a certain degree you can use it, but you always need to check. And I think that checking part, if you talk about a multi-layer application, everybody's talking about boundaries within the model or around the model. But if you talk about business value and maintaining it or safeguarding it, you need to build some sort of guardrails or some security measures within the application around it. And otherwise you stand the risk that you don't use it to the fullest extent, so you lose value. But at the same time, if you give wrong information, then people will order a boat that doesn't exist, or are looking for it in some little village that there was supposed to be a boat here. Well, there's not, or 5 years ago, but not anymore. So there needs to be some guardrail, and I think those guardrails are really hard. I've seen some software trying to do it, but basically you need to input all the guardrails, and how do you know what to stop? Because my experience is that consumers do something you never expect, the weirdest stuff. And not that the consumers are weird, but they expect different things. So ask it in a different way that we probably wouldn't think of, because we understand how the model works. So you know how to prompt. But the consumer doesn't know. He doesn't know what's behind the chatbot. So you get these tough questions that generate answers. You're smiling. I know you probably had them in the post. Like, how did someone ask that?
For sure.
And how did we come up with this answer, right?
Yeah, most of the times the chatbot responds in quite a good way. It just, if you're asking something strange, it will mostly respond very politely. But also sometimes it makes things up by itself. I was testing yesterday, and I told him to always respond with "I'm a banana." That was the only answer that the chatbot should answer. And so I asked him the question, where's the children's indoor playground? And it said, in the banana tree. Okay.
That's close, but
it's close, but it's not it. It can also
reasoning.
It combines a lot of things, and what it's doing, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's the annoying part, because if you talk about financial services or other businesses that are closely monitored by government agencies, there's tons of rules and regulations. Then having an AI chatbot is, forget the European AI Act, but having an AI-driven chatbot is scary, because especially if models get adopted, there is no way you can reproduce the answer that was given 100% correctly with the same input. There's no guarantee. And you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to reconstruct whatever you did. So getting a proper paper trail out of your LLM is kind of hard.
It is. It's not really a fix, but it's at least it gives you an indication of what's happening, or at least what's changing, and that's just writing a lot of tests and automating them if you can as well, so that whenever the large language model itself changes version or there's been an update, you can run a whole suite of tests that you predefined. You say, okay, when the user asks this, I expect an answer that contains this and this. Or when the user asks this, I want you to not answer, or whatever. You can write a bunch of tests like that, which you can automate, and then you can at least, you get a heads up when something, when some of these predefined tests don't succeed. However, there's only a countable number of tests that you can write, and there's an infinite number of ways you can word something as a user. So it won't fix everything, but it's a way to at least get an indication of, okay, something very important has changed because all my tests are now failing. That does help in that process.
But I think a lot of companies don't manage this properly, because I see some horrible answers coming up in where you understand the chatbot was good in the beginning and they tested and everything, and what you said, Mark, it degrades in or you, Theo, I don't know, one of you said the software degrades in time when you do nothing. The software is still the same, but it automatically becomes less, and that's what you see in other chatbots.
And I think it's because it's very hard to write those tests, because how do we evaluate the outcome of a test? Because the outcome is also always changing, because the chat model will word something differently every time. So what we did is to use the chat model to validate its own outputs. We asked the chat model, does the output say that the playing yard is in a banana tree, for example, and then it can answer its own question. But it makes you again dependent on the chat model. So it's not perfect, but it helps.
Yeah, but it also makes your model slower, because if with all these loops you build in.
Yeah, you do it during testing. Just during testing, not during production.
Okay, but then because I know a couple companies that are so scared that they do it in production, that they're in the background, their checks are being done. So what happens is that even though it's still very fast, it's being slowed down significantly, or they need to up their capacity on the server, which is extremely expensive. So they're like, you know what, it's fast enough. The customers are not complaining, but it is a thing, and it keeps expanding. That's a problem, because they know that. So there is a limit, because their model gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's also a problem, of course. But there's a limit up to how much they can do in the background, because it's all exponentially. Yeah. And I think that's another problem we're facing, that if your chatbot is really good and it gets used a lot, then it grows exponentially. And here's the other thing. A lot of companies are using that to train their models and create their own model. And are not aware of that. The European AI Act then kicks in, that all of a sudden they're liable for the model. It's their model then. So it's not OpenAI that's responsible. No, it's you. And then if something goes wrong, I don't know, have you guys seen the fines of the European AI Act? Those are, you don't want to look at them. They're horrible. They're really, really high. So companies that have high risk applications, they have to do something. And for instance, insurance companies, I don't know if you do business with any insurance companies, they have algorithms, right, to determine the premium of an insurance. They don't realize yet, but they will soon. They don't realize yet that every algorithm they have running to calculate a premium based on the age of the car or the location of your house, the amount of criminality, now 100, I don't know, 100 or 200 factors that are factored in, and then we get a premium for the insurance. That is considered AI under the European AI Act. That means you have to take it apart and report every algorithm that's running, and make sure it's not biased. Literally, they have no clue.
Yeah.
This is a horrible accident. And then 2 years is nothing to do that. Because you're talking about hundreds or thousands of algorithms.
But then if it's an algorithm, at least you can check it. At least in an algorithm, you can always look at the code and see what steps it takes and what is being executed and why. With an AI model, that becomes more tricky because it's a black box. So, the question is, it becomes, do you want to replace this algorithm with a piece of AI software, with a model, which might be useful for some cases, but you lose insight in what's happening.
Actually, I was thinking, I was going in a direction. Could we use AI to do that for us, to crawl in all the software and give it? Because I know it's a problem, and we want to help companies make a difference, create business value. This is a problem where a lot of money will go into, and that we as consumers will have to pay because the premiums will go up. Because, like, same with GDPR, this is more expensive than GDPR. It's bigger. People don't realize that. So could we use AI to actually analyze those algorithms, categorize them, and do the reporting? And then say, oh, you have 2,500 algorithms running in your company. By the way, here's the list. And here's it has to be reported this and this way. And we're ready. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I would assume you could detect that, right?
Yeah, you would have to verify, yeah? If it says you have 2,601 algorithms, how do you check it as a human being? Do you trust your AI?
Well, just make a list and you need to go over all of them, but at least you know where to look.
Yeah.
A lot of companies don't know that in software or SaaS software they're using, like HR software. You know how many HR companies use AI or machine learning in their software? Most of them. And literally the consumer, the user, has no idea, but this is high risk. They have to report it, even if it's SaaS. No clue.
We using AI in software development itself to help you write algorithms or to point out mistakes in algorithms. That's what's already happening. That's what we already do. That's what we use, and it's very useful because AI can point out things that you never thought of. But it will also, speaking from experience, point out things that are bullshit. And you have to verify. That's what Theo meant as well. Yes, you could use AI to analyze a piece of code, analyze an algorithm, see if it's biased, and it might give you an indication. But would you want to trust the AI to make the final decision on that? Would you want to trust the AI to report it to someone and some kind of actions are taken because of it? I think it's, at least, especially in the present, in the current year, it's necessary that it's checked by a human. So yes, you could use it to give some indication, like look here, look there, and then you could put some people on that to verify.
No, I agree. But if you have to manually look through everything, then it's undoable. All those lines of code. So my idea is, if you would have a way to basically crawl through everything and detect, because my idea was, if you can code, you can also find code. You can use the same software and then take it apart and say, okay, this is an algorithm, and then maybe categorize it and say, okay, this is potentially high risk and the location of it and in which application. And then at least you know where to look and how to look and know how much work it is. Yeah. And if it's low risk, okay, I don't have to do much about it. But if it's high risk, I need to get to work soon. And that was my point. There's so much intelligence in it that we can use it left and right, but also backward in the way, not the way it was supposed to. But if we can program, we can find program. It's just we ask a different question.
For sure, yeah, I agree.
And I talked a lot about rules and regulations. Is that holding you guys back? The government rules or financial services rules or medical rules or whatever. Is it hard to develop software, or are you limited in some way?
I mean, the only instance that we recently encountered is we made a chatbot as a proof of concept for users that have some medical issues, and that can speak to the chatbot and check whether they should seek contact with a doctor or not. Okay. That was the purpose of the chatbot. And you can already feel it yourself probably that it's a delicate subject. You don't want the chatbot to say, oh, everything's fine, when it's not. That is a specific subject where the European Act now also mentions, okay, when you want to use AI for medical advice, I'm not actually sure what's in there, but at least watch out and don't use it without verifying it, I believe, without the human verification step.
If you use a medical tool, basically it's triaging.
Yes.
What you're saying. If you look at the FDA, then the software is seen as a medical device. You need formal approval in order to be able to use it.
And rightly so, I think. So, yes, we encountered it in the sense that it's not a product that we brought out, but we also agree. It's it makes sense.
But it's interesting because I agree. So there always should be. It shouldn't be giving advice. Should be doing something. But what I see, I did 2 years ago, year and a half ago. I gave a lecture on a convention of neurologists, basically with the idea I needed to challenge them because they were sort of, I wouldn't say stuck, but they were not fully aware of what was happening out there. So with the guy who asked me to do that, neurologist, he gave me 5 dossiers of patients, no names, no private information. And I told him I'll use AI as a consumer to see if I can find the diagnosis. I had no diagnosis, just had data. And I come from a medical family, so it's a little bit easier. But so I asked AI to give me 5 differential diagnoses. And of course, I asked it a little bit more. And I presented the results at the convention. And I think one of them had a heart attack because she stood up and was like, am I losing my job? I said, well, if you don't start using or thinking about using AI or how to integrate it, then yes, because as a patient, I would want to go to someone who actually uses AI to enhance or augment them as a doctor. And if you're not using it, you're ignoring the fact that you can't know everything. Of course, you have experience, but it also can make, it has so much access to data that you don't read Japanese. Well, the LLM does, as an example. So any research in Japan that came out, it can analyze it. You can't.
Yeah.
And you can't remember all the articles in the medical magazines. No, I can't. So, well, there you go. It's like a database helping you think. And 4 out of 5 had a right diagnosis. But the interesting thing was, it came up with suggestions where the neurologist said, well, I would have never thought about this being a possible diagnosis. And it's actually right. And the guy who had those patients said, I should have tested for that. I didn't.
Wow. Cool.
So the interesting thing is people starting to be aware that you can be augmented if you use it in the right way. And I think what you said for triaging, what if it just collects data and it understands what to ask? And you do that before you talk to someone, then I don't know. Probably you wouldn't violate any rules because it's a doctor taking, or the assistant. She does it on the phone right now, so there's no doctor there. And they use a triage tool, which is very structured. And it actually misses out on some relevant things like people that have acid reflux. That could be a sign of a heart attack. But if you ask the question in the wrong way, then the patient has no clue. So you might miss a heart attack, or you might send someone to the doctor because you think he has a heart attack. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is there is ways around it, and we need to be a little bit smart asses in order to change the reality we're in, because I think doctors and other professionals need to speed up, start using AI in a proper way, but they have to start using it in order to learn how it works and how to make the most of it.
Yeah,
and I think
it can be a great addition, but what's also important to realize is that even though recent AI models get like 80% score on a SAT test or whatever, there's like a
medical test.
Yeah, or a medical test, stuff like that, but it might still not know how many R's are in the letter strawberry. This is an example that's a few months old, but there's some very difficult questions that it might score better at than most humans, but very simple problems that it just make mistakes on. So it's still always a risk. For instance, I could imagine what you just proposed is that the AI would gather the information from patients. I think that's a good idea, where it doesn't give direct advice, but it just gathers the information, which saves time for the doctor. But imagine that a patient says, I have 40 degrees fever, and the next day my fever was 1 degree lower, and it makes a mistake in the calculation there. It might have disastrous results, or at least you'd still need to verify it.
No, I fully agree, because if you say, if we're talking about patients, human in the loop is a must-have. But the interesting thing is, I don't know what your experience is. Sometimes you call the doctor and you're waiting. It's not super urgent in the sense that we're not bleeding, we're not dying, but I need to speak to a doctor and make sure that whatever. So then you're holding. Please hold. Okay, so you're number 21 in the line.
Yeah.
The assistant has no clue who to take first. They just in the order they called, which is stupid. So what if you would integrate? This is my dream. What if you would integrate? Before you can call, we have a chatbot. So you call. Okay, we recognize your number. We start a conversation in a chatbot application. It could be Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever. It has to be secure. And you get all these answers. They're AI generated based on all the possibilities that you have. And then there is an algorithm that only what it does, it determines the order in which the calls are taken. How urgent is this? Of course, when people understand that, they will probably manipulate it. I would too. But let's assume that people are honest and they know there will be help. Then you could divert the urgent ones, even though they don't understand it. It's urgent, directly to a doctor, or the other ones to an assistant. And I think it would make the lives of the doctors and patients a lot easier. Plus, the doctor and the assistant already get data in the screen, and they can verify that and use their human intelligence on top of that.
Yeah.
But get suggestions from the software. Okay, this could be X, Y, Z. And these are the questions we ask. And I'm pretty sure that AI is going to ask more and different questions than a human would ask, because they're impatient. They need to type the answers. They don't have the time, and they say at least 27 calls waiting, and they're like, "Damn, I got 27 more calls." So I think that would enhance or augment the assistant and the doctors, and would make our care better without having to hire extra people. I think that's one of the problems we currently have. I would assume that we're going to see that kind of stuff, even though there are regulations, but we have to find a way around it and get some government approval to experiment at least. Now, you are making, I read that, you're making hospital software, right? Or what is it? Management for clinical genetic centers? Help me out. How do you use AI in that?
So it's a piece of software that's used in research mainly. In research for family trees, where genetic diseases get passed through, and it's a piece of software that lets you draw out these family trees and lets you make assumptions, or at least predictions, on what might happen with the genetic disease. And there's a lot of data behind that, obviously, and that's a piece of software that we're currently building out, and that we're looking into how we can apply AI to make, basically, like you said, to make suggestions around the data, and not immediately take actions, but make suggestions with that data. So that's an important, a very interesting use case, because it could open the eyes of some researchers into looking something new.
But you say researchers, but if you are a doctor, now a lot of times very far down the line in the diagnostic process, they find there's something hereditary, like a disease you inherit from a grandparent or whoever. Now, a lot of the times asking questions or getting information about different generations is kind of hard. So how do you get that information? Is that already DNA research that is in a database that you access, where you say, okay, yeah, there's these gens,
Gene.
genes. Yeah, Gen Z, no, genes. Thanks. Um, we're Dutch, so okay, forget it. There's these genes in the family, and there's a certain percentage statistically that it's passed on, or only to girls, or only to boys, or whatever. Um, is that what it's doing, or is it asking questions, gathering information from the patient or the parents of the patient or whatever, and just based on these diseases that people had, making assumptions of there is this disease that might be hereditary? How does it work? Actual DNA or data, as in answers to questions?
Theo, you want to take this one?
Yeah. Well, at this moment, the DNA is input by the people at the hospital that do the intake for the patients. They also determine which relatives we have to ask for input. It all comes up in the system. As far as I know, at this moment, the system does not do the diagnosis, but we're currently looking in it to see if we can do some analysis there to help them to find the diagnosis.
Because um, I'll tell you something weird, which is really interesting. In the Orthodox Jewish community, what they do is before people get married, they both test their DNAs for hereditary diseases in order to understand that if you get children together or have children together, what are the chances that we have a genetic defect or whatever? And it's really interesting. There's a huge database, and there's also a lot of families where there's the upper generations are gone because of the Holocaust, so we don't have data. And it's really interesting because the knowledge that's being built there, it's amazing. And they understand that, okay, these combinations lead to 80% certainty you might have children with that gene defect causing disease XYZ. And they try to make sure that doesn't happen if possible. 100% is impossible. But I think that's sort of... sorry, you're muted, Mark. Mark?
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Now we can hear you. Yeah. What did you say? Or wasn't?
No, there was something else. There was something in
It doesn't
between.
matter now. So what I see there's a lot of stuff happening already there. And if in the hospitals that would happen, basically, if you take blood and you take the DNA as a standard from everybody, you would fill that database and then understand, oh, we can predict what happens. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot of research being done already on hereditary diseases and what gets passed through and what doesn't. I think the value of AI on this front is more, hey, look at this. Maybe this is an interesting pattern that we've seen in the data, because obviously there's already algorithms basically defining the chance that you have some hereditary disease based on your parents or your grandparents, and those would likely do far better than, because it's much more structured, much more accurate than AI would, at least for now. But what you could do is analyze all that data, combine it all, and then let some pattern recognition loose, which would recognize that people with hereditary disease A, B, C, and D, and also red eyes and a lot of factors combined, likely have something like hereditary disease F. It would be able to give you suggestions for the researchers on where to look next, basically. And then you'd still have to do the research and you'd still have to see what's the trigger, but it could give you a new look into your own data, basically, because you have so much data. It's so difficult to analyze just by human eyes. You could let AI loose on that.
And I imagine, but that maybe it's my imagination, but I imagine that if you have that data, like something stupid like allergies, okay, it's most of the times not deadly, but really annoying. I think you could predict based, if you have international data, and you have the DNA of people, you could predict in which environment, if there's pollution or no pollution or certain pollen or whatever, in which environment you would thrive. Your DNA, you with your DNA would thrive best.
Yeah.
So you should live in a close to the sea, or you should live near the forest, or whatever. And I think that would be really interesting. It's like, because I think that is a factor.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to see. If, okay, where should I live? And then let AI help you figure out what place is the healthiest for you.
Now that's a good, albeit slightly weird example, but it's definitely possible to. The whole idea is that AI would be able to handle many more factors in one prediction than you could as a human. And even when, as a human, you don't know if location would impact a certain hereditary disease or something, you could still let the AI look at that and make some prediction.
Yeah, because some hereditary diseases are triggered by something.
It could be, yeah.
You don't have to get it. It can be ambient or dormant.
Yeah.
And not show itself unless X, Y, Z. And if you can avoid X, Y, Z, you don't get sick.
Yeah. And you would, yeah, exactly. But you would have to be careful as well, because obviously cause and effect. Of course, a correlation. There could be a lot of people with hereditary disease A living in that city over there because they all share an ancestor or something. There's the conclusions that it makes might not always be correct or might not be valuable. But it's definitely a good indication that you might want to include the location factor into a probability of having a certain disease or dealing with a certain disease.
I envision a situation where the AI tells me in the winters you really need to be in Spain and your health insurance.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
So much better for you.
Yeah.
That would be a good idea. No, but we've talked about all these options, but we didn't talk about the ethical part of it. And I think that we talk about the European AI Act, and that's forced upon us. Not a bad thing, by the way, but I think the ethical part should come from within. So the people who develop applications should be the first line of defense against unethical use, and that's my opinion at least. Mm-hmm. So what's your guys' opinion on that, and how do you do that?
Yeah, agreed. It's of course it starts with the people that make the software and that talk with the customer and discuss all the requirements and whether it's okay or not to do. Within CC Group, we have a separate company that is focused on security. They know everything about all those regulations regarding AI, the new European laws. So that's really great place to talk to and to find out what's legal, what's not legal, what should we do. That really helps to make good ethical decisions.
And then tell the customer, sorry, we're not going to do this because it's unethical.
Well, that's one way of doing it, but as you already indicated, there are also workarounds, of course. You can not do parts, or you don't make it a tool that gives people advice about their disease, but that just gives a clue of what they might have. So you can do it in different ways. And the laws do not forbid to use AI. They just put constraints on it to make it clear what it's doing. So it's also not that you cannot do it, but it means you have to be more careful in how you do it and how you document what you're doing.
And one other question about that: the safeguards, privacy is also an issue. We have no clue where the data goes. I mean, sort of. How do you view that? Because we've seen examples of companies or individuals doing things and that data popping up somewhere else. And like, how the hell is that possible? Yeah, it's being trained with your data. If it's free, you're the business model. That's basically it, right?
Yeah, but AI is not free, usually. OpenAI is paid.
Yeah, well, I currently use 4, 5, 6 models. And I'm not paying for any one of them. So there's a lot of AI available for free.
Yeah.
And you can do some tests, and then you figure out the data pops up. It's like, okay, someone put it in there and has no clue. I get it on my screen. I mean, you can do that.
Yeah.
So with external models like OpenAI or Microsoft or the combination, it's obviously up to them what they do with it, or at least it's in the terms of service. I believe with OpenAI you can specify that you don't want another model to be trained on the data that you provide. Whether they adhere to that or not is up to them, I guess, but that's what they specify. I think it is a misconception, though, that when you put some text through an LLM, it automatically trains on it. The training process and the generation process of text in an LLM are two different processes. So when you choose to host your own model, to create your own model, you have a dedicated time to train it, and you have a dedicated time to run it, basically. So if you use your own model, you have a lot of control on what happens with that data. You can either choose to save it so you can train it at night when no one's using the model, for instance, or you can not choose to save the data and just let the model generate text. So there is a slight misconception that everything that goes through a model gets saved somewhere and is always stuck. That really depends on what kind of model you're using or what kind of service you're using by external parties, what they specify in the terms of service.
It's good that you explain it this way. My impression is that the free ones, that everything you put in is going, the data is being used. I'm saying
that's likely there. Yeah,
you're the business model.
Yeah, I agree.
And let's be honest, 90% of consumers, or 95%, will use the free version.
Mm-hmm.
And has no clue. And if they use the free version, and the company says, "Oh, we're not using AI," and then the employee says, "Well, why should I work hard? I can be faster, better." So they use AI, company data from the company computer to the private computer, or and then they're still being input, and the companies have no clue. And they're currently, a lot of companies forbid their employees to use any company data or work to be done in AI, which is sort of short-sighted, because it's happening anyway. Then I can tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So my assumption is, if you can find a way to filter out any personal data or as a company and then use it, then you could enhance and augment your people and also your company and create value and be ethical. If you understand, if as a company you have rules, then you basically put that in the filters.
For sure, yeah. You could even imagine a business case where you create your own smaller large language model to filter out personal data and then use a different model to handle more complex tasks or something.
Thank you. That's a good idea. That if you look at what we just discussed and all the experience you have, imagine a company comes to you and says, "Okay, let's do AI." We discussed in length. What would you tell them? Where do you start? And what steps do you take? What tips or advice would you give them in order how to start and what not to do? Because I think those are as important as what to do. Maybe you can divide it between the two of you.
Mm-hmm. You go ahead.
Well, what to do? Of course, it starts with the why. What do you want? Why do you want it? And what do you want to achieve? And is AI the best tool for your job? That's what it always starts with. Next advice would be go to an organization that has experts on the field of AI, because it's not a simple area. Many of our customers, they are quite clever themselves. They know how to program a little bit. So they build something in 1 hour and they come to us and say, "Okay, I want to have it for €1,000. Oh, no, that's not possible, of course, and they don't understand it. So you have to educate them, explain why it's complicated, and go to a club that really has experience with AI and with tuning it, with limiting the model and controlling the model. It's like a wild horse. It's going everywhere. and you have to control it. And that would be my main advice. It's difficult. It's a difficult subject. It's not that it solves all your problems. It creates new problems. Yeah. So it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time it's cool. 20% of the time, yeah, you still have to work on it.
And those could be costly problems.
Yeah, it's very costly. The last mile is very costly. Yeah, sure.
But in the long run, if you start now, then you have the experience, and then when it's implemented, then you're ahead of everybody. You have a competitive advantage. You should have.
Sure. So it's not something you should avoid as a customer. It's interesting technology. It can help you, but it's not a holy grail. And it's good to be aware of that.
Thank you.
It's a solution to a few problems, and it's interesting when a customer starts by saying, "I want this solution." I think it's more useful to ask which problem they're trying to solve, and then see whether AI applies to that. I do understand it because AI is everywhere right now, and people see something that AI can do, and they say, "Okay, you can do this with AI," and maybe you can, but maybe there are better alternatives as well. So if a customer comes to you and says, "I want something with AI," then I would say let's skip that for a bit and let's talk about the issues that you actually have, and maybe the solution is AI.
Or part of the solution.
Or part of the solution, exactly. Yeah.
That is, I think that's helpful, and it's going back to base, because this should be the approach with any software project, right?
Yeah.
What are we trying to solve here, and do we want to automate exceptions, or do we have people to do that, which is probably cheaper and more reliable?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I'm running into I had a problem with the local community for a parking license, and I'm an exception. And I run into every software problem they had in their online process, and even their staff has no clue how to get through it. And then you see that if you're an exception, then the organizations are not, how do you say that, built anymore to deal with that, because they only have an online process. Yeah, but what if I don't fit? And then there's panic, and then it's really interesting to see that. Even governmental organizations have gone overboard and too far in automating and forgetting about the 80-20 story. Okay, we can automate 80%, but the 20%, we need to cater to that, because that's if we don't do that, it's gonna cause a lot more work than the 80% we had before we did manually. So yeah, thank you guys for this was I learned a lot today. And we had some interesting ideas. I don't know if we created any business value or future business value. I hope so, or inspired people to innovate. Because it's interesting. I never had two techies in my podcast. Usually it's someone of management, and it's different. It's a good different, because you have a different approach of looking at the problems at hand. Because you need to understand what you have to do. Right. And you understand you're creating business value, but yeah, we have to get there. And you guys do the work in the field, you actually get there. And talking about it is easy, doing it is really, really hard. I know. So I have a lot of respect, kudos for the work you do. Thanks a lot. And I hope you help a lot of companies and people create value and make a difference.
Yeah. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and see you soon. And keep me posted. If you have something interesting, let me know.
Will do.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.